The Valor system had always been a beacon in the dark, a crossroads of trade, a star cluster where voices from 100 species intermingled and where the great banners of the galactic concord flew high. Its primary world, Valor Prime, glittered with crystalline towers that reflected the light of its twin suns. For centuries, its orbital docks had been crowded with freighters, liners, and warships alike. Now, all of it burned. The first sign of the Dracthal swarm's arrival had been the silence of its colonies, one after another, their beacons going dark. No distress call, no survivors. Only fragments of transmissions, shrieks, plasma fire, then static. The Concord fleets had mobilized, but even their finest formations had shattered against the tide. The swarm did not conquer, it consumed. It did not negotiate, it devoured. The battle for Valor Prime had lasted 3 days. On the 4th, there was nothing left to defend. Ships that hadn't been vaporized drifted in shattered pieces, their hulls crawling with the insectoid horde. The planet's defense grid had fallen silent, overwhelmed, and its surface below was already scarred with craters glowing faintly from atmospheric entry strikes. At the farthest edge of the system, tucked into the shadow of an asteroid, a single relay station remained. Its once proud spires were pitted with plasma burns. Whole decks had been vented to space. Only one chamber still clung to power, lit by the dull flicker of emergency diodes. Inside, among cracked consoles and dangling wires, a lone figure worked with shaking hands. Rilvan of the Cellari had been a communication technician, not a soldier. His kind were scholars and builders, with delicate mandibles and long-fingered hands better suited for instruments than for weapons. Yet here he was, alone, crouched over a sputtering transmitter that might fail at any moment. His chitin plates were cracked from shrapnel, one of his 4 eyes swollen shut. His breath came in harsh rasps as he tapped at the console with trembling fingers. The relay's core was unstable, barely alive. But it was all he had. He leaned forward, mandibles clicking softly in rhythm with his desperation. "Please," his voice cracked. "Please, anyone. This is Relay Outpost Valor Echo 7. The swarm has destroyed everything. If you hear this, if anyone hears this, please, help us." The message broadcast on every frequency he could unlock. The official Concord bands, the pirate bands, even the frequencies marked as restricted. He no longer cared who answered. He had nothing left to lose. For hours, only silence came back. Rilvan slumped in his chair, mandibles drooping. His hearts pounded with that strange mixture of exhaustion and terror, the kind that came when one's body realized there was nothing left to fight for. Around him, the faint tremors of distant explosions still shook the relay. The swarm was burning the outer moons now. Soon they would sweep the asteroids clean, and when they did, the outpost would be nothing more than a husk for their hatchlings. Better, perhaps, to die here in the dark. Better than in the mandibles of the Dracthal. He closed his eyes. Then, his console blinked. The sound was sharp, alien, unlike the soft tones of Concord codes. A jagged, pulsing alarm lit up the chamber, bathing everything in crimson. Rilvan jerked upright, staring as the transmission registered. It was not Concord blue. Not a trader's silver. Not even the green of fringe colonies. This was red. A deep, searing red that seemed to stain the air itself. The audio followed. Not a Cellari voice. Not Concord. The tone was deep, harsh, carrying weight like thunder rolling across stone. A voice that seemed wrong, in ways Rilvan could not explain. Message received. The words froze him. His antennae twitched, his breathing shallow. He had heard of voices like this only in whispers. Stories exchanged in hushed tones in academies, rumors repeated in taverns when the night grew late. Deathworlders. Every child of the Concord knew the stories of Earth, of a planet deemed cursed, of an ecosystem so violent it forged predators that lived in endless struggle. Humanity, the natives of that world, had been exiled centuries ago. Too unstable, too unpredictable, too willing to wage war for reasons the Concord could never comprehend. They had not been destroyed, no. The Council had agreed on exile, to wall them away behind treaties and fear. It had been safer that way. Safer for all. But the stories remained. Ships that strayed too near Earth vanished. Scouts who glimpsed their borders spoke of massive constructs, hulking war machines bristling with weapons. Humanity had become a myth, a half-remembered nightmare lurking just beyond the stars. And now Rilvan's desperate signal had reached them. His mandibles clattered as he leaned closer to the console, voice trembling. Who is this? What will you send? The channel crackled, static hissing like a serpent. Then the voice returned. Low. Final. Unyielding. A dreadnought. The word struck him like a physical blow. He had seen Concord dreadnoughts before, vast and gleaming, capable of leveling cities. But the way the human said it, it was not a ship. It was a sentence. An execution. For long moments, Rilvan sat frozen, his thoughts spinning in chaos. He had begged for salvation. He had screamed into the dark for anyone to hear. And now the darkest thing of all had listened. The humans were coming. The hours that followed blurred into a haze. Rilvan wandered the cracked corridors of the relay station, the red glow of that alien transmission still burned into his vision. His every step echoed in the silence of the dead outpost, a silence broken only by the hum of failing systems. He thought of his people, of Valor Prime reduced to ash, of the fleets that had fallen. He thought of the council chambers, their endless debates, their endless fear of the very species he had just summoned. And he thought of the stories. Of humans who fought wars not for territory or resources, but for principle. Of soldiers who would rather burn a world than surrender it. Of a people who, when faced with extinction, did not plead for mercy, but sharpened their blades and roared into the abyss. The dread rose in his chest like poison. Had he summoned saviors? Or monsters far worse than the swarm? Days later, as his relay began to fail completely, Rilvan felt it. The stars shifted. The void trembled. Something vast was approaching. He rushed to the viewport, claws scraping against the frame. The black of space bent, twisted, tore. A rift opened, jagged and raw, reality itself screaming in silence as something forced its way through. And there it was. The human dreadnought. Not sleek like Concord ships, not elegant, not beautiful. It was a beast of iron, an obsidian leviathan scarred with age and war. Its silhouette devoured starlight, its hull bristling with weapons the size of cities. Engines burned with a slow, ominous pulse, like the heartbeat of some colossal predator. Rilvan's breath caught in his throat. He could not move. Could not think. He had called for help. And help had come. But staring into the abyssal shadow of that dreadnought, he was no longer certain what fate he had unleashed. The void rippled as the rift sealed behind it, and for a long, shuddering moment, the Valor system fell silent. The human dreadnought hung in the darkness like an executioner's blade, blotting out the stars. Its colossal form dwarfed the ruined relay station where Rilvan watched, trembling in awe and terror. The ship's profile was not like the silver arcs of Concord cruisers, nor the crystalline lattices of Cellari vessels. This was a fortress turned predator, every line angled for war, its armored plates dark and scarred from battles long past. The Nemesis. The name was not transmitted, but Rilvan felt it resonate in the marrow of his bones. He imagined thousands of voices whispering it across the galaxy, a name carried on smoke and blood. The silence broke with a voice, cold, steady, human. This system is under our protection. All hostile forces will be terminated. The last word carried no softness. No compromise. Termination. Rilvan's mandibles clicked nervously. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the pressure of inevitability. It was as though the galaxy itself had changed course, and now nothing could stop its plunge into darkness. The swarm came. First in trickles, scouting vessels, sharp-winged craft that darted into the system in search of prey. Their movements were swift, mechanical, driven by instinct more than strategy. They saw the nemesis and shrieked across subspace frequencies, summoning the tide. And the tide answered. From the depths of hyperspace, the Dracthal arrived in force. Thousands of ships, vast organic constructs bristling with plasma nodes and serrated limbs. They poured into Vaylor's orbit, blacking out the starlight, wings beating trails of fire across the void. They did not fear the Dreadnought. They had no concept of fear. They descended upon it like locusts on a tree. The nemesis stirred. Its engines flared, and the void thundered as the first salvo erupted. Massive cannons, hidden within the armored flanks, came alive in a storm of light. Lances of plasma brighter than suns split the darkness, and the leading wave of swarm ships vanished in a chain of fireballs. The recoil alone shook Rilvan's station, rattling its failing bulkheads. He staggered, clutching the viewport, eyes wide as entire fleets evaporated in seconds. The humans did not fire warning shots. They did not probe. Every blast was an execution. The swarm pressed on. Hundreds of vessels darted through the inferno, their serrated hulls scraping past shredded wreckage. They swarmed the nemesis from all angles, vomiting streams of plasma into its armor. The Dreadnought's shields flared white-hot under the onslaught, the void boiling with energy. Automated flak cannons whirred to life along its hull, unleashing storms of metallic shrapnel. The projectiles tore through Dracthal ships like scythes through grass, reducing dozens to clouds of twisted wreckage. Still they came. Closer now. Rilvan could see the crawling shapes, boarding craft latching onto the nemesis's hull like ticks upon a beast. Serrated limbs carved into armor, mandibles biting deep. They cut through plating, forcing breaches, spilling their horrors into the human vessel. The Dreadnought did not flinch. Its external weapons shifted focus to the larger swarm fleet, leaving the intruders to what lay within. And that was when the humans themselves emerged. The nemesis's interior lit with crimson alarms. Bulkheads sealed, corridors locked into kill zones. From the barracks surged armored figures, humans clad in exosuits of blackened steel, helmets glowing with cold optics. They moved with predatory precision, rifles clutched in gauntlets, blades sheathed at their sides. Rilvan could not see them directly, but the relay caught fragments of their combat feeds, grainy, intercepted transmissions that painted a picture of nightmare efficiency. The first swarm intruders burst through a hatch, their claws dripping molten metal. They shrieked in hunger. The humans were waiting. Gunfire thundered in the confined spaces, every round ripping chitin and flesh apart. Explosives concussed the corridors, scattering limbs across bulkheads. When the swarm pushed forward in greater numbers, the humans switched to close combat, knives flashing, armored fists crushing mandibles, bodies colliding with bone-snapping force. They did not fall back. They did not retreat. They hunted. Rilvan's mandibles clattered in horrified fascination. These were not soldiers. Soldiers fought for ground, for territory, for objectives. These humans moved like predators defending their den, each motion efficient, ruthless, unrelenting. For every Cellari who would have fled, for every Concord officer who would have surrendered, the humans advanced. And the swarm died. Hours passed. The battle spread across the system. The nemesis tore swathes through the main Dracthal fleet, its cannon spearing capital ships one after another. Wreckage littered the void, burning in silence. Boarding attempts dwindled as the swarm began to realize that every breach meant slaughter. Still, they pressed on. Rilvan watched until his vision blurred. He saw plasma strike the Dreadnought, carving burning trenches into its armor. He saw it vanish in clouds of swarm vessels, only to emerge again in a storm of fire. He saw human fighters, smaller craft launched from hidden bays, dive into the swarm with suicidal bravery, scattering enemies with missiles and gunfire. And then, silence. The last of the swarm broke and fled, their retreat chaotic, mindless. The nemesis gave no chase. It simply turned its guns upon those who lagged behind, vaporizing them until the stars burned clear again. The void grew still. Debris drifted in endless orbits. Firelight from shattered ships cast a dim, mournful glow over Vaylor's scarred planets. The swarm was gone. Rilvan collapsed to his knees, mandibles trembling. His relay station shuddered gently from the echoes of distant detonations. For the first time in weeks, there was no sound of claws, no endless shriek of plasma fire. Only silence. It had not been a battle. It had been an execution. When the human commander's voice returned, it was calm. Untroubled. The same steady tone as before. Enemy eradicated. System secured. Rilvan's hearts pounded. His people had been saved, yes. Vaylor had been spared, for now. But as he stared at the colossal dreadnought looming like a mountain of iron, a thought gnawed at him. What price had he unleashed upon the galaxy? The nemesis drifted in silence, its blackened hull scarred but unbroken. It did not leave. It waited. Watching. And Rilvan, staring into its shadow, understood the terrible truth. Salvation had come. But it was the kind of salvation that walked hand in hand with annihilation. The Vaylor system should have been a tomb. By every calculation, every precedent, it should have fallen into the same silence that claimed hundreds of colonies before it. Yet word of its survival spread like wildfire across the galactic networks. The Cellari whispered it in markets. The Kfari hissed it in their war clans. Even the aloof Kilari sang it in their crystalline towers. A system on the edge of annihilation had not merely survived, it had been saved. But by whom, was the question that shook the Concord to its core. Reports contradicted themselves. Some spoke of an iron leviathan that devoured the swarm. Others insisted it was a fleet, though no fleet had been sighted. Still others whispered the forbidden name, as if saying it aloud might summon them. Humans. The word alone stirred panic. In the grand chamber of the Concord, beneath the stained glass dome that once represented unity, arguments devolved into shouts. Species that prided themselves on reason snarled like feral beasts. They were exiled, a Kilari delegate cried, crystalline tones trembling with outrage. By treaty, by law. They cannot return. And yet they have, hissed a Kvari general, his scaled tail thrashing against the marble floor. Would you rather the swarm consumed us all? Or shall we condemn Vaylor for daring to survive? Survive? A Cellari counselor rasped, mandibles clicking in fear. You call this survival? The humans do not save. They consume. The swarm was a threat, yes, but have we traded one monster for another? No consensus was reached. Only fear. For the first time in centuries, the Concord realized it no longer commanded the galaxy. While politicians argued, Rilvan stood aboard the dreadnought itself. The nemesis had summoned him, or rather, the humans had. Two gunmetal-armored figures had arrived at his failing relay station without ceremony, their heavy boots echoing like thunder against the deck. They offered no words of comfort, only a command. Admiral Kale requests your presence. Now he stood upon the bridge of the Leviathan, his small frame dwarfed by its scale. The bridge was unlike any Concord command center. There were no gilded consoles, no ornate banners, no polished displays. Everything here was functional, brutal, efficient. The walls hummed with reactor power. Viewports stretched wide, revealing the scarred system beyond. And at its center stood the Admiral. Kale was massive, even for a human. His armor bore the scars of countless battles, its black plating dull beneath the bridge lights. His face, unhelmeted, was worse, lined, weathered, marked with burns and scars that spoke of wounds no Cellari could have endured. His eyes, sharp and steady, pinned Rilvan like a predator considering prey. "You sent the call." Kale's voice was gravel, rough with authority. "Not a question. A statement of fact." "Yes," Rilvan stammered. I had no choice." "The swarm." "You had a choice," Kale interrupted. His gaze did not waver. "You chose us." The weight of those words sank into Rilvan's chest like a stone. He thought of the council, of centuries of exile. The Deathworlders had been a nightmare beyond the horizon. And he had opened the door. "I only wished to save my people," Rilvan whispered, mandibles trembling. Kale turned back to the viewport. Beyond, the wreckage of the swarm drifted in silent orbits, glowing faintly from fires that still smoldered. "You didn't save them," he said at last. "We did. And not for your sake." Rilvan tilted his head, confused. "Then why?" Kale's scarred lips curved, though it was not a smile. "Because we've fought monsters before. And when monsters come, you don't beg. You don't bargain. You send bigger monsters." The words chilled Rilvan more than the swarm ever had. The nemesis did not leave Valor. It hunted. For weeks, the Dreadnought stalked the void, engines growling as it carved a path through every surviving fragment of the swarm. Drakthal hive ships, carriers, breeding vessels, they were found, and they were annihilated. No retreat was allowed. No quarter given. The Concord protested. Their transmissions filled the subspace bands with pleas for restraint, demands for explanation, threats of sanctions. The humans did not answer. Their silence was louder than any response could have been. From his small guest quarters, Rilvan watched reports trickle in. Each one painted the same picture: the swarm was being exterminated system by system, not contained, not repelled, eradicated. And yet, he felt no triumph. Only dread. Because the galaxy had learned something it had spent 1,000 years pretending not to know. The humans had not grown weaker in their exile. They had grown into something else entirely. At last, the nemesis gathered its fleet. Rilvan's breath caught when he saw it. They had not come alone. From hidden rifts emerged more human ships, smaller than the Dreadnought, but no less terrifying. Cruisers, carriers, and frigates bristling with weapons, hulls scarred with battle. A war fleet, silent and waiting. It was not rescue. It was invasion dressed as salvation. The realization struck him with the weight of inevitability. The Concord had feared their return, and now they were here. Not by conquest, not by demand, but because someone had called. Because he had called. And the humans had answered. Rilvan was summoned once more to the Admiral's presence. This time, Kale stood before a massive holomap, crimson light casting his scarred face in shadow. Systems glowed across the display, each one marked with swarm presence, and each one already crossed out. The Cellari technician swallowed hard. "You mean to cleanse them all?" Kale's voice was steady. "We mean to finish what you could not." Rilvan hesitated, mandibles trembling. "And when the swarm is gone? Will you leave?" For the first time, the Admiral turned his gaze directly on him. His eyes were not cruel, not mocking. They were worse. They were honest. "No. The swarm was never the enemy." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Rilvan dared to whisper. "Then, who is?" Kale's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "The galaxy. All of it. Every council, every empire, every world that thought they could wall us away while monsters consumed their neighbors. You feared us, exiled us, damned us. And when your precious unity failed, you turned to us. That is your answer. The Selari stumbled back, his legs weak. His heart hammered against his chest. For a moment, he could not breathe. The humans had not returned as allies. They had returned as the inevitable. The Nemesis departed weeks later, its fleet vanishing into the same rifts it had come from. The Valor system was left eerily quiet. The swarm was gone. The Dreadnought was gone. But the shadow remained. Rilvan stood once more at his battered relay station, staring into the void. He thought of the council, of the debates that would rage, of the fear that would spread like a plague. He thought of the humans, of their dark leviathans, their ruthless warriors, their promise of annihilation. And he thought of the words Admiral Kale had left him with, words that would haunt the galaxy forever. You call us when you're desperate. When monsters come, you summon worse monsters. Remember that, Selari. Remember who you chose. As the silence closed in around him, Rilvan whispered the truth he dared not share with anyone else. Better the monsters we choose, than the monsters we fear. The words tasted like ash. But he knew, deep in the marrow of his being, that the galaxy would never sleep easily again.